I want you to picture something for me. You built a house. From the ground up, you dug the foundation with your bare hands. You chose every single brick. You painted every wall. You planted flowers in the front yard because you truly believed that it was yours. Now imagine someone walks up to your front door, puts a key in the lock, and tells you that the house never belonged to you. And then 2 security guards walk you off the property, while the man who took it stands in your living room and watches you go. That is exactly what happened to me. Except it wasn't a house. It was the company I spent 8 years of my life building. And the man standing in my living room was my business partner. The person I trusted more than almost anyone in the world. The morning it happened, I wore the same blazer I had on the day I signed the founding documents for my company. I don't know why I wore it. Maybe some part of me knew. Maybe some part of me wanted to remember what it felt like to walk into that building as someone who mattered. I remember walking through the lobby, past the front desk where Maria always said good morning to me and asked about my weekend, past the coffee station where I had cried happy tears on the day we hit our first $1 million in revenue, past the big open floor where 60 people sat, people I had hired, people I had believed in, people whose names I knew and whose families I asked about. And not a single one of them looked at me. They all stared at their screens, heads down, like I was already gone. The security guards, both of them people I had personally approved when we expanded the building, walked on either side of me all the way to the elevator. Nobody said anything. The whole floor was silent except for the sound of my heels on the floor. And then I saw him, Daniel Hargrove, my partner, standing by the window in his corner office, the one right next to mine, the one we had argued over in a friendly way when we first moved into the building because we both wanted the view. He was holding a coffee cup, and as I passed, he raised it toward me, like a toast. I will never forget that smile for the rest of my life. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time after that. I don't know how long exactly. Maybe an hour. Maybe 2. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there with my hands in my lap, staring at the steering wheel. And slowly, very slowly, a feeling came over me. Not sadness, not anger, clarity. I picked up my phone, opened my notes, and typed 3 words, not done. Yet. Then I put the car in reverse, and I drove away. Because I had a lot of work to do. But before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you how I brought that man's entire empire down to its knees, I need to tell you who I am. Because Daniel Hargrove spent 8 years trying to make me forget, and I want you to understand exactly what he was dealing with. My name is Sophia Chen. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. A regular house on a regular street. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 5 people. Me, my 2 little brothers, my grandma, we called her Nai, and my mom. My dad left when I was 9 years old. No goodbye, no explanation. He was just gone one morning, like a picture that falls off the wall in the night. You wake up and there's just a blank space where something used to be. My mom never complained. Not once. She worked 2 jobs my entire childhood. Hotel housekeeping in the mornings, sewing alterations for a dry cleaner at night. She came home smelling like cleaning solution and thread. Her hands were always rough and dry from the chemicals. Every night before she went to sleep, I would put lotion on her hands. She would close her eyes and sigh. That's one of my earliest memories. Her hands and the sound of her finally resting. I promised myself when I was 11 years old that one day my mom would never have to work that hard again. I wrote it in a little notebook I kept under my bed. I still have it. I was never the most popular kid in school. I wasn't the prettiest or the most athletic or the most anything, really. But I was the one who organized things. At 10, I ran the school bake sale and made a little spreadsheet to track what sold best. At 12, I was selling handmade bracelets in the cafeteria. At 14, I started a neighborhood dog walking service and hired 2 of my friends to help. My grandma used to watch me and shake her head. She said in Mandarin, "This child is going to either run a company or run a country. There is no in between." I applied for every scholarship I could find. Got into Ohio State on a full ride. Business and marketing. Graduated, top of my class. And then I moved to New York with $3,200 in my bank account, 1 duffel bag, and absolutely no safety net whatsoever. For 2 years I freelanced. Writing brand strategies, marketing plans, launch campaigns, whatever people needed, I did it. I worked out of a studio apartment so small that I had to fold my desk against the wall every night just to open the bathroom door. And then one day, I was sitting in a coffee shop on 34th Street when the man at the table next to me started pitching an investor on the phone. Loudly, confidently, like everyone in the room should be listening. I started writing notes in my notebook, critiquing his pitch. Not to be rude, just because my brain doesn't turn off. He finished the call, looked over at my notebook, and said, "You've been taking notes on my pitch, haven't you?" It wasn't even a question. I said yes. He said, "Tell me what I got wrong." I told him. For 45 minutes straight. He listened without interrupting once, which honestly impressed me. Most people don't listen like that. When I finished, he leaned back and smiled. "You just saved me from the worst pitch of my career. I think I need to hire you." His name was Daniel Hargrove. He was charming, sharp, funny, ambitious. He seemed like exactly the kind of partner who could open doors I hadn't been able to open alone. And he was right about that. He could open doors. What I didn't know was that he was also very, very good at closing them, especially on the people who helped him get inside. We started Nova & Co. 6 months after we met. I came up with the name over coffee one afternoon. Nova, like a star that suddenly blazes brighter than everything around it. I designed the logo on a napkin. I still have that napkin. I was the brain behind everything. The ideas, the strategy, the client work, the late nights. Daniel was the energy, the handshakes, the room reader, the guy who could walk into a party not knowing anyone and leave with 3 business cards and 2 dinner invitations. Together we were unstoppable, or at least that's what I believed. We grew fast. Year 1, 6 clients. Year 2, 30. Year 3, we moved into our first real office. I remember the day we got the keys. Daniel and I stood in the empty space, just the 2 of us, and looked at each other. He said, "We actually did it, Soph." I laughed and said, "We're just getting started." Those were good years. I want to be honest about that, because the bad ending doesn't erase the good beginning. I was proud of what we built. I was happy, and I think that happiness was part of why it took me so long to see what was actually happening. Looking back now, there were signs. Little things I noticed, but explained away. Because that's what you do when you trust someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt until you run out of doubt to give. The client who called to congratulate Daniel on a campaign I had led, written, and delivered. Daniel said thank you and moved on. He didn't correct them. The board presentation, where the executive summary had both our names on it, but Daniel presented all 20 slides himself while I sat in the corner with a water glass. When I brought it up afterward, he said, "You're not a natural public speaker, Soph. I'm just protecting the pitch. I let it go. 1 slip. 2 slips. 3. At what point does a pattern stop being a coincidence? I kept waiting for the moment I'd realize I was wrong about him. Instead, I got the moment I realized I was right. It was a Tuesday night. I came back to the office after a client dinner because I had left my laptop. The floor was mostly dark. The cleaning crew had already come through. But there was light under Daniel's door, and his door was open just a little. I heard his voice. And then I heard my name. I stopped. My heels were in my hand. I was completely silent in the hallway, and I listened. Daniel said, "By the time the new funding comes in, her ownership is below 35%. At that point, she can't block anything." I pressed my back against the wall. The voice on the other end said, "And she won't push back?" Daniel said, "Sophia trusts me completely. That's always been her biggest weakness." And then he laughed. That warm, easy laugh I had heard 1,000 times, the one that used to make me feel safe. I stood in that hallway, and my heart wasn't racing. It wasn't breaking, it was just recalibrating. Like a compass that's been held next to a magnet for years, suddenly finding north again. I walked to my office, got my laptop, and I left, quietly, without a word. He had been planning this, carefully, for a long time, and I had been too busy building our company to notice him dismantling my place in it. I sat at my kitchen table until 5 in the morning. Legal pad. Every document I could pull up from home. Partnership agreements, board filings, meeting minutes, shareholder records. I read them all. Really read them. Not the way you read something when you trust the person who handed it to you. The way you read something when you're looking for a lie. And I found it. Over the past 2 years, my ownership in Nova & Co. had been quietly shrinking, not in big obvious ways, in tiny technical adjustments buried inside routine paperwork, new share classes, small changes, amendments attached to documents I had signed in a hurry, trusting Daniel to handle the details. I had started the company owning 51%. I was now at 34, and the new funding round that I had spent 4 months pitching to investors would push me below the line where I had any real power left. He used my own success against me, my best work, my hardest effort. He turned it into the tool he used to take everything away. I closed my laptop at 5 in the morning, walked to my window, and I thought about that little girl in Dayton. The one who put lotion on her mother's hands. The one who wrote promises in a notebook under her bed. She did not come this far to let this be the ending. 3 days later, Daniel called a board meeting. He told me it was about the new funding structure. He seemed completely normal. He even brought me a coffee before it started. I took it, said thank you, looked him right in the eyes. He presented a restructuring proposal, new leadership model, clearer roles, a single CEO with full authority. The board thought he was talking about growing the company. He was talking about removing me from it. They voted 7-2. I was one of the 2. After the meeting, Daniel caught me in the hallway. He put his hand on my shoulder and said very quietly and very gently, "Sophia, this isn't personal. This is just business. You know that." I looked at his hand on my shoulder. I thought about the laugh in the dark hallway. I said, "I know exactly what this is, Daniel." And I walked away. I need to tell you something I haven't talked about publicly before, because this story isn't just about the revenge. It's about what happens in between. The part nobody shows you. For about 3 weeks after they pushed me out, I completely fell apart. I stopped eating real meals. I lost 8 pounds without trying. I slept in short bursts, an hour here, 40 minutes there, Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see the same thing. That lobby, those security guards, Daniel's coffee cup raised like a toast. I called my mom at 2 in the morning once and cried for an hour straight. She stayed on the phone the whole time. Didn't say much, just stayed. That's the thing about moms. They show up even when they don't know what to say. The hardest part wasn't losing the company. It wasn't losing the title or the office or the salary. It was losing the answer to a question I didn't know I'd been asking my whole life. Am I enough? Nova & Co. was my proof that the girl from Dayton, whose dad left and whose mom had rough hands, was worth something. Without it, I didn't know who I was. And that hollow floating feeling of not knowing who you are was worse than anything Daniel could have done to me on paper. On the 19th day, my phone rang. It was Nai, my grandma, 81 years old. She had come to America with one suitcase and absolutely zero interest in feeling sorry for herself. She worked a laundry for 30 years, buried my grandfather, raised my mother alone, never once asked anyone to feel sorry for her. She said to me in Mandarin, very calmly, Sophia, "A tree doesn't cry when the wind bends it. It grows back, because the roots are still there. Your roots are still there, are they not?" I couldn't speak. She said, "Get up, wash your face, go build something better than what he took." And she hung up. 81 years old, no time for self-pity. I stared at my phone for a long moment, and then I got up. I washed my face, and I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was make a list. Not of everything I had lost, but of everything I still had. My brain. 8 years of real experience. A reputation that Daniel could damage, but couldn't destroy entirely. Relationships with clients who had trusted me personally, not just the company name. Every original piece of work I had ever created. Saved and time-stamped. And something else. Something Daniel had never taken seriously. Me. I called 3 people that week. First, my college roommate Priya. Smart, warm, connected. Now a partner at a venture firm. She picked up before the second ring and said, "I've been waiting for you to call." Second, Marcus Webb, a former client who had told me 3 times over the years, "If you ever go out on your own, I will be your first call." I called him first. Third, a lawyer named Sandra Park. Sandra had a reputation in New York for one specific thing: taking down powerful men who thought they were untouchable. I told Sandra everything. And at the end of 2 hours, she looked at me and said, "Sophia, did you know Daniel has done this before?" She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a legal filing from 11 years ago. A startup called Merindian Creative, and the name of the woman who had founded it, Rachel Torres. I read the filing, and my hands started shaking, not from fear, from recognition, because the story in those pages was my story. Word for word, step by step, the partnership, the gradual shift in credit, the paperwork, the board vote. Daniel had done this before, to another woman. 3 years before he ever walked into that coffee shop and sat down next to me. He had practiced on her. I was not his first victim. I was supposed to be his last. Sandra gave me Rachel's number. I stared at it for a long time before I dialed. She picked up on the second ring, like she had been waiting too. We talked for 4 hours. She had rebuilt quietly in Chicago, but she had never stopped watching what Daniel was doing. She cried. I cried. We went back and forth between anger and grief and this strange dark laughter that comes when something is so awful your body doesn't know what else to do. By the end of the call, Rachel said something I had been thinking, but hadn't said out loud yet. "Sophia, if there are 2 of us, there are probably more." There were. Sandra spent 2 weeks digging, and she found her. Diane Okafor, founder of a logistics company in Chicago. 7 years ago. Same structure, same method, same result. 3 women, 3 companies, 11 years, 1 man, 1 pattern. Enough. Now I have to tell you something about the morning they walked me out of the building. Something I haven't mentioned yet. I was there 3 hours before anyone else arrived. I still had my access card. No one had thought to deactivate it yet. So at 5 in the morning, I let myself in, and I went to the server room. I plugged in a small encrypted drive, and I copied 3 things. First, Daniel's private messages with his personal lawyer going back 18 months. Under the company's communication policy, which Daniel had never updated, co-founders had access to internal legal correspondence. He had never thought to change that. Second, a recording from a board session 4 months before the vote. A private session where Daniel had previewed his plan to 3 board members and had described it, in his own words, as a way to remove me without giving me legal grounds to fight back. His own voice, his own words. Third, 3 years of billing records. Invoices from a company I had never heard of, paid by Nova & Co. to a name that turned out to be Daniel's own personal account. $340,000. Paid to himself, from the company, over 3 years. He hadn't just stolen my company, he had been stealing from it the entire time, and I had the proof, safe, backed up in 3 places. By the time the security guards showed up that morning to walk me out, I had already done what I came to do. For 9 months after they pushed me out, I kept my head down. No social media, no interviews, no noise. When I ran into people from the industry, I was warm, calm, and vague, taking some time to think about the next chapter. Really grateful for everything Nova taught me. Daniel thought I was broken. I needed him to keep thinking that. 3 months after I left, I quietly registered a new company. I called it Luminary, because a luminary is someone whose light makes the people around them brighter. That is who I had always tried to be. It just took losing everything to finally build a company that actually reflected that. Priya helped me raise the first round of funding. Marcus wrote the first check personally. He didn't hesitate for a single second. I brought on 7 people in the first month. Every single one of them had reached out to me quietly after I left Nova. They had watched what happened. Some of them had known something was wrong for a long time. They were waiting for me to call. We worked out of a co-working space. No announcement, no big reveal, just work. The kind of quiet, serious, focused work that doesn't need an audience. By month 7, Luminary had signed its first big client. A company that had originally been a Nova account. They reached out to us because the work that had kept them loyal to Nova had always been mine. They knew it. They had just been waiting for me to land somewhere. By month 8, we had $8 million worth of contracts in the pipeline, and Sandra called to say the lawsuit was ready to file. 3 plaintiffs, 11 years of evidence, 1 defendant. We chose the date carefully. Daniel had been building toward a big announcement, his own new funding round for Hargrove Industries, his rebranded version of my company. He had been teasing it publicly for weeks, setting himself up for a big moment. We picked the Monday before his Tuesday announcement. We wanted him to see what was coming, just not in time to stop it. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, not from nerves. I was past nerves by then, just from that feeling of knowing something is about to shift. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I had read all those documents 9 months earlier, with a cup of coffee and my phone face up. At 6:47 in the morning, Sandra texted me. It's filed. I put my phone down. Picked up my coffee. and took a long, slow sip. Daniel was served at his home at 7:15 in the morning, while he was getting ready for his big day. By 9 in the morning, the financial press had found the filing. Court documents are public record, and journalists who cover corporate stories watch those filings every single morning. By 10, two of Daniel's investors had called to pause their commitments. At 10:47, Luminary issued its press release, Series A funding, $15 million. The headline, Nova & Co. Founder Sophia Chen launches Luminary and says it's the company she always meant to build. Within an hour, it was everywhere, not just because of the money, because of the story. People had been watching what happened to me from the sidelines, quietly, carefully. They had seen a woman get pushed out of the company she built, and they had been waiting to see what she would do next. I gave them their answer. That afternoon, Daniel held a press conference. He stood at a podium in what used to be my building, called the lawsuit baseless, retaliatory, the desperate move of a bitter ex-partner. He was composed, precise, convincing, like always. But here's what he didn't know. That same morning, Sandra had quietly shared the board recording with 3 journalists. His voice, clear as anything, 4 months before the vote, describing his plan to remove me in his own words. By the time his press conference ended, the first story had already published. The headline, Recording Reveals Hargrove Pre-Planned Removal of Nova Co-Founder. He called it Avoiding a Lawsuit. Now he's in one. His own words. His own voice. 4 months of premeditation, laid out for the entire world to read. The 3rd investor pulled out before dinner. The 4th called after the news cycle hit the evening shows. His funding round didn't pause. It collapsed entirely. The board at Hargrove Industries did not stand by him. They are loyal to the company, not to the person in the big chair. They called an emergency session, hired an independent accounting firm to audit the books. The firm found the shell company. They found the $340,000. And they found 2 additional arrangements that even I hadn't known about. The board voted to remove Daniel Hargrove as CEO. 7-0, the same number they had used to vote me out. Same room, same table, different day, different direction. Daniel was escorted out of the building by security guards, through the lobby, past the front desk, past the coffee station, past 60 people who stared at their screens and didn't look up. In the building that still, for now, had his name on the wall. I was not there to see it. I didn't need to be. I was in my new office, with my new team, working. 3 weeks after the board removed him, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me pick up. It was Daniel. His voice was different. The polish was gone. The ease was gone. He sounded like a regular person, which was strange because in 8 years I had never heard him sound like that. He said, Sophia, I need you to know I didn't think it would go this far. I sat with that for a moment. He didn't think it would go this far, as if destroying someone's life was a math error, a miscalculation, not a choice he made every single day for years. I said, you told your lawyer that I was too busy trying to save something that had already died to notice what you were doing. You said, I'd never see it coming. Silence. I saw it coming, I said. I just waited until I was ready, and I hung up. The lawsuit settled 14 months after it was filed. Daniel did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that, because this is a real story, and real life is not always a perfect movie. But here is what did happen. He paid back every cent of the money he had taken from the company. With interest, he paid damages to me, Rachel, and Diane. He was permanently barred from ever leading a public company again. and the intellectual property rights to the original Nova brand, the name I wrote on a napkin, the logo I designed, came back to me. I didn't use it. I didn't need to. I had Luminary. Luminary today has 60 employees. We did over $40 million in revenue last year. And every single person on our team has an ownership stake in the company, written into our founding documents, on day one, by me, so that what happened to me could never happen to any of them. My mom came to visit last spring. I took her to the Luminary office, showed her around, introduced her to everyone. On the way out, she stopped in the lobby and looked at the logo on the wall. Clean gold letters on white. She stood there for a long time, and then she reached over and took my hand. Her hands weren't rough anymore. I had made sure of that years ago. That was the first promise I ever kept to myself. She said, "I used to lie awake worrying about you, every night for years, that it was too hard, that the price was too high." She squeezed my hand. "I don't worry anymore," she said. And I thought about the little girl in Dayton, Ohio, selling bracelets, running bake sales, reading business books by lamplight, writing promises in a notebook under her bed, believing, stubbornly, irrationally, beautifully, that there was a seat at the table for her. There was. There always had been. She just had to build the table herself. If someone tries to erase you, let them think they succeeded, and then come back so bright, they have to shield their eyes.